All right, so you guys wanted to really get into NFL Week 5, huh? We'll get ready to dive in because we're talking biggest storylines, breakout players, maybe even busting a few myths along the way. We got all your articles and fantasy football questions right here, so let's do it.
You know what's wild to me this week is how quickly things change in the NFL. Couple of games and suddenly those preseason predictions out the window.
No kidding. Like, how about them Cowboys barely squeaking by the Steelers? That ending had everybody talking, especially that Prescott to Tolbert game-winning touchdown. So is that a fluke or a sign of things to come? You know, asking for fantasy purposes and all.
Tempting to get caught up in the hype, right?
Yeah.
Especially with Dallas needing more targets besides CeeDee Lamb. Got to keep those defenses honest.
Yeah, for sure. Spread the field.
But honestly, that box score, it doesn't tell the whole story.
You're saying it wasn't as impressive as it looked live?
Exactly. Don't forget, they practically fumbled the game away right after that touchdown. That clock management was, well, let's just say it needs work. Tolbert stepping up. Huge, no question. But the bigger issue, the inconsistency on offense.
And the penalties, weren't those killing them again?
11 for 87 yards, if you're keeping track. And it's every week, killing their momentum. Dowdle had a great game running the ball, absolutely, but until they fix those basic mistakes, it's hard to get too excited about this win. You know, they might have just covered up some serious problems.
So maybe hit pause on the Cowboys victory parade for now.
For now, yeah. Let's see them string together some solid games before we go crowding them. Speaking of solid games, though, your guy, Jaden Daniels, you were curious how he'd handle a tougher Browns defense, and
Let's just say I'm not disappointed. He looked really good out there.
he did. And this wasn't just putting up numbers against a weak team. This was growth. Remember all the pre-draft talk about him scrambling too early?
Yeah.
Not handling pressure well.
Yeah, definitely heard that a lot.
He aced those tests against Cleveland, especially against the blitz. That calm, that poise in the pocket. That's what separates the good from the great.
And that growth, that's huge for the Commanders, right? Shows he can handle the heat and make plays against a real defense.
No doubt. It's all part of his development and honestly makes him way more interesting for fantasy going forward. Speaking of intriguing quarterbacks, though, how about we switch gears to another rookie who's got people talking, but for different reasons?
You talk about Bo Nix and the Broncos. Yeah, you had them circled on your list. I know you're especially interested to see how their offense would look under Sean Payton.
And that's where things get a little head-scratching. Peyton, he's known for that offensive creativity, right? But so far, feels like they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Not exactly a vote of confidence.
Yeah, not really. I mean, 11 different receivers catching passes. Nick's only completing one pass over 10 air yards. It's not confusing.
Especially with the weapons they've got on that side of the ball.
Exactly. You'd expect more from a coach like Peyton. And it's not just a one-week thing either. It's been a trend. Something ain't clicking, and it's tough to say exactly what it is.
So, Broncos offense mystery, wrapped in a riddle, inside an enigma. Got it. But their defense, though, different story, right? You were pretty high on their secondary, especially with Patrick Surtain II leading the charge.
For good reason. He had himself a day against the Raiders, 2 interceptions, including a pick 6.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Surtain being a stud. Old news. What's impressive is Riley Moss stepping up alongside him.
He is having a breakout season, huh?
Big time. That secondary is quickly becoming one of the best in the league. They're keeping the Broncos in games even when the offense is
Non-existent.
Well, let's just say they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The question is, for how long? Can their defense carry them through an entire season? Risky strategy, even with a defense as talented as theirs.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. And speaking of teams maybe exceeding expectations early on, you were also curious about the Texans. They haven't looked quite as sharp lately, especially with all the injuries piling up. How concerned should we be?
Those injuries are rough, no question. Mechie being out for the season with that hamstring, huge blow. And Collins being out really showed how thin they are at receiver. They really need Mixon back to get that running game going strong again.
So basically their ceiling depends on staying healthy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Need those key guys back if they want to make a serious run. Their margin for error is, well, let's just say it's a lot smaller now.
Tough break for sure. All right, let's switch gears to a team that seems to have found their rhythm after a kind of slow start. You want to talk Ravens, and I gotta say, Lamar Jackson looked like his old self against the Bengals.
He did, didn't he? That was a statement game. Prove they can air it out when they need to.
And it wasn't just the Mark Andrews show either, which is a great sign.
Exactly. Spread the ball around really well. What impressed me was his play against man coverage. 8 completions, 97 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's vintage Lamar Jackson.
So not just a case of picking on a weak defense, they were executing at a high level.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Now, the Bengals' defense isn't exactly a pushover, so got to keep things in perspective. But that performance silenced a lot of doubters, myself included, show that their offense is more than just Lamar running for his life.
And that is a scary thought for the rest of the league. All right, before we move on to some other players who caught your eye, let's talk about a little rumor that's been floating around out there. You mentioned Davante Adams and the Jets.
Yes. The hypothetical on everyone's mind.
So what do you think? Dream team or recipe for disaster?
Let's just say I wouldn't be putting that Super Bowl-bound sticker on my car just yet.
Fair enough.
Look, Davante Adams is incredible, one of the best out there, no doubt. But even he's not a miracle worker.
You think he can't just single-handedly fix the Jets?
Exactly. There are bigger problems to solve there. Their offensive scheme, it feels outdated. Too many errors, drops, killing drives even when they get open.
Like trying to fix a leaky faucet by just pouring more water in.
Right. Perfect analogy. Got to fix the foundation, not just add another shiny piece on top. Now, you also mentioned George Pickens and the lack of targets he's seeing in the Steelers' offense. That's another head-scratcher.
It's wild. The guy's shown flashes, but they barely use him.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He was practically invisible against the Cowboys. Makes you wonder if there's something else going on. Maybe a clash with the coaching staff. Who knows?
Well, it's a shame because when they throw him the ball, the guy is electric.
No question.
Yeah.
And honestly, their offense could use a spark. Running game's stuck. Fields is inconsistent. They're not using the weapons they've got. Speaking of inconsistent, that brings us to another quarterback you wanted to talk about. Jordan Love.
Yes, Mr. Unpredictable. 1 minute, he looks like the second coming of Aaron Rodgers. The next, he's throwing picks into triple coverage. What gives?
It's the Jordan Love experience. You remember those great moments we saw from him last season? Those weren't flukes. They are part of a bigger pattern.
So he's a high-risk, high-reward type of player.
Exactly. He's a gunslinger through and through. Trusts his arm, maybe a little too much sometimes, and he's always going for the big play. Seems like the Packers are okay with riding that wave, for better or worse.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. Well, it makes for entertaining football, that's for sure. Now, changing gears a bit, you also brought up the Bills and how they've seemed to struggle against some tougher opponents. They looked unstoppable early on, but they've come back down to earth a bit.
It's what happens. Teams figure them out. That over-reliance on Josh Allen's arm, and without a consistent threat besides Diggs, it's a weakness.
We saw it against the Texans, right? Diggs was quiet, and no one else really stepped up.
Exactly. Teams have realized, contain Diggs, force those other guys to beat you. Suddenly, the Bills' offense isn't so scary. They're really missing Shakir in the slot.
Yeah, he's such a reliable target, moves the chains.
Their best separator, too. Without him, Allen's forced to hold the ball longer, and that's when the pressure gets to him. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust going forward, especially with some tough defenses coming up on the schedule.
Speaking of adjustments, kind of reminds me of another team we talked about. The Cowboys. They may have pulled out the win, but those red zone issues, still there.
Tell me about it. At times, it was like they were allergic to the end zone, fumbles, picks, even a blocked field goal they found every way but scoring.
Good thing their defense showed up, especially without Parsons and Lawrence still.
No kidding. They were dominant, holding that Steelers offense to only 226 total yards. If you can keep playing defense like that, it'll buy the offense some time to, figure things out.
Because right now it feels like a ticking time bomb, doesn't it?
You said it. They're playing with fire, depending on their defense every single week. Not a sustainable strategy in the long run. Eventually, those offensive woes are going to catch up with them.
It really goes to show you, huh? What we see in those first few weeks doesn't always tell the whole story.
Nope, not even close.
Teams change, players step up. Those early trends can disappear faster than a fumble on a trick play, right?
And that's why we love this game.
Yeah, actually.
It's all about, really looking deeper, beyond the headlines, past the box score. Understanding what's really going on. Anyone can tell you who won, but figuring out WHY, they won. That's where the good stuff is.
And that is why we deep dive. We don't just scratch the surface here. We're grabbing the scuba gear and going all the way down. So to wrap things up, let's bring it back to you, listener name.
We've covered a lot today, right? Rookie surprises, some veterans maybe not living up to the hype. Offense is confusing everybody. Defense is winning games.
We saw teams like the Broncos leaning hard on that D to cover up for what's going on with the offense.
And others? Like those Bills, they're struggling to adjust when their stars get shut down.
Seems like a big theme this week was teams relying too much on just one or two guys to make it happen.
For sure. Dangerous game, especially come playoff time. You need everyone firing on all cylinders to win those big games. Can't just ride one or two guys all the way.
So here's something to think about. We talked about the Texans without Collins, the Ravens depending on Lamar and Andrews, and of course those Bills with Allen and Diggs. Which of those teams worries you the most, T, with how much they're asking of just a few guys? And what can they even do to fix it before it's too late? Think about that. Until next time.